So with the swim platforms, duck boards in mind, I thought it was probably pretty important to talk about the different forces that are going to be imparted onto the swim platforms, because eventually they're going to need to be able to hold 80, 90, 100 kilos, depending on who's standing on the back of them, because they will serve as a ladder platform for if you do want to get out and have a swim and then jump back in the boat. So obviously out the ladder, stand on the back as you climb over. So depending on the thickness of the lads that are coming out fishing, then might need up to 100 kilos of force actually be imparted on it. So different kind of forces that you might come across, or the only 5 that you'll ever come across: tension, torsion, bending, compression, and shear. Torsion being the twisting of the actual material, bending being the changing of the shape of material. But tension, compression, and shear are the ones that are really going to come into fact with the design of these swim platforms. So we'll talk about them in a little bit more detail. So tension, think of that as like a stretching force. So whatever joint is, the major player of holding that piece together, stretching that joint and seeing if it will break in that stretch kind of sense. Compression, the exact opposite. That's when the joint or the parent material is getting compressed, and that can have different effects depending on the shape and type of joint structure that you're kind of trying to do. And then shear obviously is the material shearing across its length or across its shape, and that might come into play as well throughout these swim platforms. But if you have a look, obviously, like this is the diagram of the transom with the 3 holes and the swim platform. And as you saw from the video that I made them, they've got the 3 aluminium dowels, 12mm aluminium dowels, 12 or 19, either way, pretty decent sized alley dowels. And over here, I've given like a side profile of the transom, the swim platform, the dowels going into the hole in the transom, and then this line here represents the layup, the glass layup, both the top side and the underside. And I've just done a couple of little arrows to show where the force is going to be. So I think that if you apply your weight to the swim platform in this orientation, then the tension force is going to be the most prevalent, and it is going to be forcing against the layup, both between the transom and between the swim platform itself. And so that tension force is being applied to the joint or the resin, the glass matting that makes up the material of that joint in that layup, and that's the tension force there. The way that that's going to be treated in this particular application is the large surface area in which the layup is going to cover. So it's not just going to be a thin strip and relying on a thin strip. It's going to be the entire top side of the transom and the entire top side of the swim platform. The layup on the underside, although it will be subject to the same kind of forces, are not going to be extreme because all of the weight is going to be applied from that direction. So there's a little bit of stuff going on underneath, I think, but not as much as what's going on the top. So tension, that's how we're going to treat it. We have a little bit of tension as well in this joint structure here, which might translate into a little bit of bending force, trying to actually change the shape of that fillet, shape of the layup. Once again though, that's going to be treated by the large surface area, so that the force is put through the entire large surface area rather than just in that little bit. And it's also going to be treated by ensuring that we've got a good layup on the underside to limit the compression that is happening on this side, which will then limit the ability to contort and bend this joint here. So yeah, I mean, that kind of brings us on to the compression side of the house. So this underside here will be facing that compression force if the weight is applied in that downwards direction. It'll compress that joint. The way we treat that is by having, once again, just a nice solid layup in that direction. A little bit more compression and tension that is going to apply because the holes, just wait for that car to go past, because the holes are slightly oversized, because I'm not that good at measuring, there will be a tiny little bit of gap between the dowel on either side. So when the weight's applied in this direction, there will be a little bit of compression and a little bit of torsion on the underside. So compression on the top side of the pin, torsion on the underside. And so the way we're going to treat that is by filling it with that thickened epoxy mix, not epoxy, that thickened polyester mix, so that there is limited ability for the gap above, because it won't be a gap anymore, to compress, which will take away the tension on the underside of it too. Next force that we're dealing with is the shear force, which is right in this joint. This is obviously accentuated this joint gap here. Now, the way to maintain this as a shear force rather than a bending force is by making sure this gap is as close as possible, and it fits pretty well, so there's going to be fuck all gap in between it. So that converts any sort of bending that might go on with the dowel here into shear force. And the way that we treat that is by using a solid material like the aluminium, having multiple of them, like 3 across the board. And I mean, they'll be able to take 100 kilos, those three dowels in their shear plane, no dramas. And yeah, making sure that there's little room to convert that. I'm not worried about the shear force, I'm worried about it turning into a bending force. So yeah, limiting the joint space and ensuring that I use the appropriate materials, which I think I did. So yeah, that's the forces that we're kind of dealing with there. I am going to do one instead of both, so I'll do one at a time, and that way if I test it and it turns out to be complete shit, then I can rip that one off and I don't have to worry about ripping 2 off. The so what of that will be, I will probably seek out some stainless steel, and I'll fabricate a couple out of stainless instead, and that'll be the way to go. Cool, so we've got the fillet down. I've got the bits of glass ready to go that are just going to be the inside of that fillet joint, because I need it to be able to support itself, so I can get rid of the cord to do the full glass layup, which I'll probably do tomorrow morning when it's a little bit cooler, depending what the humidity's like. I have been hanging around while it cures off, just making sure that it doesn't shift at all. And really, all I'm trying to do with this is line it up with the hull line, or that water line, that mustard yellow, and kind of make it run parallel to those lines. As I think that although the arse is going to tuck down and that won't be perfectly level necessarily to the water, when you look at it, if it follows the water line of the boat, which is the same as the underside of that outside chine, then it's always going to look like it's in the right spot, and I don't think it's going to tip too much that it will be unusable by any means. It's also high enough that I don't think it's going to cause too much drag. Maybe a little bit as you try to get up on plane, and if that ends up being the case, all I'll do is I'll chop them shorter and refinish the ends to a length that I think will do. So what you'll see me go on to next is getting these bits of glass in that fillet. It'll be chop, stitched, biax, chop, both sides, under and over, and what I'll do is I'll go chop on the top, chop on the bottom, DB on the top, DB on the bottom, chop, chop, and that way the cure times are going to be the same in the top fillet and the bottom fillet, and I think in doing that I'm going to avoid any of that thermic reaction causing the swim platform to change its line. So I think that's going to be the way to do it, so that's what we see. Nice, so that's all finished for the initial fillet glassing in. This presents a couple of its own issues, being that that fillet is obviously going to be a little bit higher than the other two planes. So aesthetically down the track, that might take a little bit more to blend in. But we'll just have to fucking deal with that when we get to it. Couple of lessons learned there is the underside is going to be a little bit of fun because it naturally wants to pull away. So even just these little strips that I was doing, they really wanted to pull away until the resin got tacky, so they just wanted to drop off. Especially if you didn't hold up both ends, they would just try to peel off the whole time. Lucky for me though, it's so hot that even with a slightly colder mixture, I'm going from the usual 60 minute or so, you don't ever like get the 60 minutes, you get about 45 of work time, about half of that down to about 20 minutes before it becomes this gloopy mess that you can't really use anymore. So normally you mix it at about 2%, so that was 500 grams of the resin. So I put, instead of the full 10 grams of catalyst in, I only put 7. So that's a cold mix, and the heat of the day has still caused that to go off in 20-25 minutes of work time. Not fully go off, like it's still liquid, but it's unusable, like I said, gloopy kind of mess. So that's something to factor in as well. I think I'm going to have to focus on doing the glassing a bit more early morning or very late afternoon, just because the ramifications of that, just like if you were to glass in the direct sunlight, is there's a chance that it might flash cure, so cure too fast, and it'll cure not evenly throughout the mix, is my understanding of it. So you'll get bits that are tacky that will never not be tacky, no matter how many layers or extra catalyst or whatever you do. They just will not ever cure because that chemical process is taken out of it. So yeah, gonna have to play with that going forward. It is the afternoon of finishing that layup. It is cured off. So now I'm gonna give it a little bit of a test to see how it goes for weight. I've got a couple of different types of weights and stuff that I'll give it a go, but I've got the angle meter set. But that's not taking into account any weight that this imparts on the boat as a whole. So I've also just got the bevel square up against the transom to see if it's actual flex in the platform. I've already done a test with 20 kilos of little brick weights, which you'll see in a sec. So I'm going to go straight to putting a 25 kilo dumbbell on it. I think that I'll set myself a limit of probably 0.5 of a degree in flex, depending on where it's flexing. So if it's saying 0.5 and the bevel square is still nice and tight and it's probably just movement in the boat on the trailer, no dramas, I'll keep going. But things that I'm looking out for is, yeah, that change in angle, gap in the bevel square, and any noises which might indicate that the resin is about to delaminate. It's important to do this test because it's going to tell me if I need to strengthen up the corners or if I need to scrap this idea entirely. So it could fail, and I fucking hope it doesn't. So that's 25 kilos, tiny little gap opened up on the square, and we're sitting at 0.1 at the moment. These little brick weights here, they weigh 1 kilo each. That's 4 of them. Six of them. 8 of them. Oh, still no movement, I don't think. So I'll just zero that off again, but I wasn't seeing any more movement. It was at 0.1. Not seeing the square open too much more either. That's 12. Right, so we've got another 0.05, so that would be 0.15 of deflection with 45 kilos on it. So what I'll do is I'll rip all those bricks off, and then I'll get the other dumbbell up there and start fresh from 50 kilos, but I'll tear it off so we're starting at 0 again, and then I'll put the 50 on, so we'll see what that looks like. Right, so start point again. I just swapped out the blocks so there's a little bit more room for the dumbbells at the end, because that's where the most force will be imparted. So that's teared off. So there's that 0.05 that we knew. And the 0.15, which is tracking like where we were adding the 0.2. I mean, that kind of makes sense, I guess, with it's actually 5 kilos heavier than it was before. Still the same amount of gap in the square, but I did hear the trailer give a little bit, so you can see I'm pushing on the transom then. A little bit of bounce in the rollers. But let's have another crack. I can hear the trailer a little bit, but nothing in the transom area. that gap isn't opening up at all anymore on that square. So that's good. So we're at about half our tolerance with, let me just put the rest of these on and we'll have a look. All right, so that's half our tolerance, or what I assessed was the tolerance. Tiny little gap up the top there with 70 kilos on it. So at this point, I might just hang off it and see. All right, now we're going for the 90 kilo test, which is me hanging off the back. I'm going to try and do it safely rather than standing up the top, and I'll just hang off the underside of it so I can catch myself on the ground without hurting myself. Teared off the angle meter, got the square set up, and I've got the missus looking at both of those things to let me know if it's going to go. So let's have a crack. All right, so obviously a bit of a gap opened up. What's the reading on the meter?
0.225. 0.4.
Gap's about the same as it was.
Yep.
I'm hanging off, that's all my weight. All right, so 0.4. 0.4 with 90 kilos on it. From my angle, it looked like a pretty similar gap between the square as we had on the 70 kilos, not too much more, but there was a little bit more on the meter, but within that tolerance that I set for myself. So now I think the smart thing to do would be to put one more layer of glass on tomorrow, repeat the test, and see if that layer of glass adds any more strength in that corner. But right now that's holding 90 kilos, which is pretty cool. All right, we've got both of the platforms on. Both of them hold my weight. You would have seen in the couple of tests that I did, and I would have thrown up a couple of shorts of the bloody portside one, holding the weight and not flexing. So we found out that even with the extra layer of chop on top of that one, exact same results, you know, 0.4, 0.45 degrees of flex, either, or at least on the angle meter anyway. I don't actually think there was half a degree of flex in the board to the transom. I think that at least half of that number was coming from the boat sinking onto the rollers in the trailer, and the hull just taking up a tiny bit of flex. So I think that's a pretty good result. Obviously there'll be a little bit of handrail support going on those as well, which will take any that extra flex out. And I mean, the other cool thing is I've got these little work tables out the back now. So you would have also seen a massive failure being trying to do the bottom of the transom and the underside of the board. It was so hot that it started kicking really, really early. And we're talking about, you know, 7 or 8 minutes into the mix, the pot was starting to go gluggy and unusable. And I looked up at the sheet and I was like, I'm only halfway wetting out this sheet. There's no way I'm going to finish it. So I ripped it off. So what that is, I'm going to have to tackle the underside of the boards and the under the waterline portion of the transom in much smaller sections, but that's cool because it's not structural. It's just to even out the thickness of the transom to make whatever amount of fairing I do later easier. But it doesn't have to be perfect, because the beauty of having solid pieces that cut the line of the waterline to the top side of the transom is it makes the fairing process less precise, because you've got a physical block there that stops you being able to compare the top and the bottom as if it were one solid sheet. Likewise, going into putting those boards on, they're pretty fucking good. Buy the old Mark 1 eyeball for level with each other, but once a motor is slapped in between, if there is a slight difference in them, you're never going to notice. But yeah, that leads me to the final bit of demo that I want to do inside today. So I've got the gazebo with the side walls and stuff all set up just to keep dust down in the neighbourhood. But I just need to get what we talked about last time, the little wet spots out of the keel line so I can get that stringer in. And I've also got the boat sitting pretty level, so I'm gonna suss out the top of the stringers to make sure that they're ready to receive the floor, and I'm also just going to trim down the couple of bulkheads that need it so that they can fit between the stringers. And once that's done, it's all, you know, floor and below demo complete, and I'll be able to get the floor in hopefully before I go back to work. Maybe not though, but ideally, you know, once the floor is in and it's fully sealed, then I don't have to worry about having this ghastly gazebo in the driveway, you know, for the next 6 months, because I can just chuck another cover over the top, and if a little bit of water gets in, it doesn't matter because it'll just run out the bunghole out the back. So that is the plan for today, and I'm not going to bore you with any more demo stuff, so I will catch you next time.